Howard the Duck, directed by Willard Huyck and produced by George Lucas, is a sci-fi comedy about an anthropomorphic duck who is transported from his home planet to Earth. The film was one of the first major flops for Lucasfilm, with critics panning its bizarre premise, poor special effects, and awkward mix of genres. Despite its significant budget and backing from Lucas, Howard the Duck was a box office disaster. The film won 4 Razzies at the 1987 ceremony, including Worst Picture and Worst New Star for the title character. Howard the Duck has since gained a cult following, particularly among fans of 80s pop culture, but it remains a notorious misstep in the careers of everyone involved. The film is often cited as one of the worst comic book adaptations ever made. Basic Instinct 2, directed by Michael Caton Jones and starring Sharon Stone, is the sequel to the 1992 erotic thriller Basic Instinct. The film follows Catherine Tramiel, now living in London, as she becomes involved in another murder investigation. The sequel was heavily criticized for its lack of suspense, poor dialogue, and Stone's over-the-top performance. Despite the success of the original film, Basic Instinct 2 Inches failed to capture the same allure. The film won 4 Razzies at the 2007 ceremony, including Worst Picture and Worst Actress for Stone. Basic Instinct 2 Inches was a box office bomb and marked a low point in Stone's career. The film's failure also highlighted the risks of reviving a franchise years after its initial success, particularly when the original film's appeal was tied so closely to its moment in pop culture. All About Steve, directed by Phil Trail and starring Sandra Bullock, is a romantic comedy about a quirky crossword puzzle creator who becomes infatuated with a news cameraman and follows him across the country. Despite Bullock's star power, the film was heavily criticized for its awkward humor, unlikable characters, and confusing tone. The film struggled to find its footing between romantic comedy and farce, leading to a disjointed viewing experience. At the 2010 Razzies, All About Steve won Worst Actress for Sandra Bullock, who humorously accepted the award in person, and Worst Screen Couple for Bullock and co-star Bradley Cooper. The film's poor reception was a rare misstep for Bullock, who had also won an Oscar that same year for her performance in The Blind Side. All About Steve serves as a reminder that even the most talented actors can have an off day. Directed by Michael Bay and starring Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen is the second installment in the Transformers franchise. The film was heavily criticized for its convoluted plot, excessive special effects, and juvenile humor. Despite its commercial success, grossing over $800 million worldwide, the film was widely panned by critics and fans alike. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen won 3 Razzies at the 2010 ceremony, including Worst Picture and Worst Director. The film's poor reception led to a reassessment of the franchise, with subsequent films attempting to address some of the criticisms. However, Revenge of the Fallen remains a low point in the series, often cited as an example of blockbuster excess gone wrong. Jaws: The Revenge is the 4th installment in the Jaws franchise, directed by Joseph Sargent. The film follows Ellen Brody, played by Lorraine Gary, as she believes a great white shark is seeking revenge on her family. Despite the legacy of the original Jaws film, this sequel was widely criticized for its implausible plot, poor special effects, and lack of suspense, which made it a far cry from the original's terror-inducing success. Jaws: The Revenge was a box office disappointment and a critical disaster, earning the film a Razzie for Worst Visual Effects. The film's failure effectively ended the Jaws franchise, as it was unable to recapture the tension and excitement of the original. Jaws: The Revenge is often cited as one of the worst sequels ever made, underscoring the risks of extending a franchise beyond its natural lifespan. Directed by Guy Ritchie and starring Madonna, Swept Away is a remake of the 1974 Italian film of the same name. The film tells the story of a wealthy woman and a poor fisherman who are stranded on a deserted island, where their power dynamics shift. Unfortunately, the film's attempt to blend romance, comedy, and social commentary fell flat, with critics lambasting the lack of chemistry between the leads and the outdated themes. Swept Away was a box office bomb and a critical failure, earning 5 Razzie Awards in 2003, including Worst Picture and Worst Actress for Madonna. The film's poor reception was seen as a significant setback for both Ritchie and Madonna's careers at the time. Swept Away remains a cautionary tale about the risks of remaking a classic film without a clear vision or purpose. The Cat in the Hat, directed by Bo Welch and starring Mike Myers, is a live-action adaptation of the classic Dr. Seuss children's book. The film was criticized for its crass humor, off-putting visual style, and lack of faithfulness to the source material. Despite its bright colors and family-friendly premise, the film was widely regarded as a misfire, with many reviewers finding it more creepy than charming. At the 2004 Razzies, The Cat in the Hat was nominated in multiple categories, winning for Worst Excuse for an Actual Movie. The film's failure led to a moratorium on live-action adaptations of Dr. Seuss's work, with future adaptations being produced as animated films instead. The Cat in the Hat remains a cautionary tale about the risks of adapting beloved children's books into live-action films. Directed by Etan Cohen and starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, Holmes and Watson is a comedy that parodies the iconic detective duo Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. The film was universally panned for its uninspired humor, poor writing, and lackluster performances. Despite the comedic pedigree of its leads, Holmes and Watson failed to deliver the laughs that audiences and critics expected. The film won 4 Razzies at the 2019 ceremony, including Worst Picture and Worst Director. Holmes and Watson was widely regarded as one of the worst films of the year, and its failure marked a low point in the careers of both Ferrell and Reilly, who had previously found success as a comedic duo. The film's reception highlighted the risks of relying too heavily on star power and familiar characters to carry a weak script. Starring Eddie Murphy and directed by Ron Underwood, The Adventures of Pluto Nash is a sci-fi comedy about a nightclub owner on the moon who becomes embroiled in a conspiracy. The film was a critical and commercial failure, with reviewers criticizing its unfunny script, lackluster special effects, and uninspired performances. Despite its high budget, the film failed to connect with audiences and is considered one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. At the 2003 Razzies, The Adventures of Pluto Nash was nominated in 5 categories. However, its win came in 2010, when Murphy won Worst Actor of the Decade for the movie. The film's failure marked a low point in Murphy's career, which had already been on a decline due to a series of underperforming films. Speed 2. Cruise Control, directed by Jan de Bont and starring Sandra Bullock and Jason Patric, is the sequel to the 1994 action hit, Speed. The film shifts the action from a runaway bus to a cruise ship that has been hijacked by a madman. Despite the success of the original film, Speed 2 Inches was widely criticized for its lackluster action sequences, weak plot, and the absence of Keanu Reeves, who had starred in the first film. The film won a Razzie for Worst Remake or Sequel at the 1998 ceremony, with Bullock also receiving a nomination for Worst Actress. Speed 2 Inches was a box office disappointment and is often cited as one of the worst sequels in Hollywood history. The film's failure underscored the difficulties of capturing the lightning in a bottle success of a surprise hit like the original, Speed. Mike Myers starred in and co-wrote The Love Guru, a comedy about a self-help guru who tries to solve the romantic troubles of a hockey player. Directed by Marco Schnabel, the film was intended as a comeback vehicle for Myers after the success of the Austin Powers series. However, The Love Guru was met with overwhelmingly negative reviews, with critics panning its juvenile humor, offensive stereotypes, and lackluster plot. At the 2009 Razzies, The Love Guru won 3 awards, including Worst Picture and Worst Actor for Myers. The film's failure marked a significant decline in Myers' career, as it was his first major flop after a string of hits. The Love Guru is often cited as one of the worst comedies of the 2000s and a cautionary example of the dangers of relying too heavily on outdated comedic tropes. Directed by and starring Kevin Costner, The Postman is a post-apocalyptic drama about a drifter who becomes a symbol of hope by delivering mail in a war-torn America. The film, based on the novel by David Brin, was a passion project for Costner, but it was met with overwhelmingly negative reviews. Critics panned the film's bloated runtime, melodramatic tone, and heavy-handed messaging. The Postman won 5 Razzies at the 1998 ceremony, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. The film's failure was a significant blow to Costner's career, coming just a few years after the mixed reception of his other epic, Waterworld. Despite its initial reception, The Postman has gained a small cult following, with some viewers appreciating its earnestness and ambition. Jack and Jill, directed by Dennis Dugan and starring Adam Sandler, is a comedy about a man named Jack who dreads the annual visit of his twin sister, Jill, both roles played by Sandler. The film was heavily criticized for its lazy humor, uninspired plot, and Sandler's over-the-top dual performance. Despite its star-studded cast, including Al Pacino in a bizarre supporting role, the film was widely regarded as one of Sandler's worst efforts. The 2012 Razzies made history by awarding Jack and Jill in every single category, a first for the ceremony. It took home 10 awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. The film's unprecedented sweep underscored the critical disdain for Sandler's brand of comedy at the time. Catwoman, directed by Pitov and starring Halle Berry, is a notorious flop that reimagined the iconic DC Comics character with little connection to her comic book origins. The film centers on Patience Phillips, a timid graphic designer who gains cat-like abilities and a new sense of confidence after a near-death experience. However, the film's lackluster special effects, disjointed script, and misguided direction led to widespread criticism. Despite Halle Berry's best efforts, Catwoman was a disaster at the box office and with critics. It earned 4 Razzies in 2005, including Worst Picture and Worst Actress. Berry famously accepted her Razzie in person, humorously acknowledging the film's flaws and her career low point. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan, The Last Airbender is a live-action adaptation of the beloved animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender. The film was intended to launch a new fantasy franchise but was met with overwhelming negative reviews. Critics and fans alike criticized the film for its wooden performances, poor dialogue, and significant deviations from the source material. The film's poor reception was particularly disappointing given the popularity and critical acclaim of the original series. The Last Airbender won 5 Razzies at the 2011 ceremony, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Screenplay. The film's failure was a significant blow to Shyamalan's career, which had already been struggling after a series of poorly received films. The Last Airbender remains a cautionary tale about the challenges of adapting beloved animated properties into live-action films. Dirty Love, directed by John Mallory Asher and starring Jenny McCarthy, is a romantic comedy about a woman who seeks revenge on her cheating boyfriend. The film was widely criticized for its crude humor, poor writing, and lackluster performances. Despite its low budget and modest ambitions, Dirty Love managed to attract an unusual amount of negative attention, with many critics calling it one of the worst films of the decade. At the 2006 Razzies, Dirty Love won 4 awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Actress, and Worst Director. Jenny McCarthy, who also wrote the screenplay, was particularly criticized for her role in the film's failure. Dirty Love has since been largely forgotten, but it remains a reminder of the perils of poorly executed comedy and the risks of trying to build a film around a single star's persona. The Emoji Movie, directed by Tony Leondis, is an animated film that imagines the world inside a smartphone, where emojis live and work. The film was widely panned for its lazy storytelling, uninspired humor, and blatant product placement. Despite its colorful animation and star-studded voice cast, including T.J. Miller, James Corden, and Anna Faris, the film was seen as a cynical cash grab rather than a meaningful contribution to the animation genre. The film won 4 Razzies at the 2018 ceremony, including Worst Picture and Worst Director. The Emoji Movie was criticized for its lack of originality and was often compared unfavorably to other animated films that explored similar themes with more creativity and heart. Despite its box office success, the film is widely regarded as one of the worst animated movies of the decade. The final installment of the Twilight series, directed by Bill Condon and starring Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, Breaking Dawn Part 2 Inches was supposed to be the grand conclusion of the vampire romance saga. However, despite its box office success, the film was met with mixed to negative reviews. Critics targeted the film's special effects, wooden performances, and the absurdity of the plot, particularly the infamous CGI baby. Breaking Dawn Part 2 Inches was nominated for multiple Razzies in 2013 and took home 7 awards, including Worst Picture and Worst Actress. The film's reception underscored the divisive nature of the Twilight series as a whole, which, despite its commercial success, was often ridiculed by critics and non-fans. Directed by George P. Cosmatos and starring Sylvester Stallone, Rambo: First Blood Part 2 is the sequel to the 1982 film First Blood. The film follows John Rambo as he returns to Vietnam on a mission to rescue American prisoners of war. While the film was a commercial success and became an iconic action movie, it was also criticized for its simplistic plot, excessive violence, and jingoistic tone. The film won a Razzie for Worst Screenplay in 1986, with Stallone also receiving nominations for Worst Actor and Worst Screenplay. Despite its flaws, Rambo First Blood Part 2 remains a significant entry in the Rambo franchise and is often referenced in discussions of 1980s action cinema. The film's success also helped solidify Stallone's status as an action star, despite the mixed critical reception. Glitter, directed by Vondie Curtis Hall and starring Mariah Carey, is a musical drama about a young singer's rise to fame in the 1980s. The film was intended to showcase Carey's acting talents and musical prowess, but it was widely panned for its weak storyline, poor performances, and cliched dialogue. Despite featuring several original songs by Carey, the film failed to resonate with both critics and audiences. Glitter was a box office flop and earned Carey a Razzie Award for Worst Actress at the 2002 ceremony. The film's failure was a significant setback for Carey's career, coinciding with a period of personal and professional struggles. Although Glitter has since developed a cult following, it remains a notorious example of a music star's unsuccessful transition to film. Showgirls, directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Elizabeth Berkley, is a drama about a young woman who moves to Las Vegas with dreams of becoming a showgirl. The film was notorious for its explicit content, over-the-top performances, and melodramatic plot. Despite its high-profile director and substantial budget, Showgirls was a critical and commercial disaster, with many reviewers calling it one of the worst films ever made. The film swept the 1996 Razzies, winning 7 awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Actress. Showgirls has since gained a cult following for its campy, so bad it's good appeal, but it remains a low point in the careers of everyone involved. The film's failure also had a significant impact on Elizabeth Berkley's career, making it difficult for her to find substantial roles in Hollywood thereafter. I Know Who Killed Me, directed by Chris Sivertson and starring Lindsay Lohan, is a psychological thriller about a young woman who is abducted and later claims to be someone else. The film was intended as a dark, gritty departure for Lohan, who was looking to move away from her Disney image. However, the film's convoluted plot, poor pacing, and Lohan's dual performance were widely criticized, leading to its poor reception. The film won 8 Razzies at the 2008 ceremony, including Worst Picture, Worst Actress, and Worst Director. I Know Who Killed Me was seen as a significant low point in Lohan's career, contributing to her struggles in the years that followed. The film is often cited as an example of the challenges faced by child stars as they attempt to transition to more adult roles. Crossroads, directed by Tamara Davis and starring Britney Spears, is a coming-of-age drama about 3 childhood friends who embark on a road trip across the country. The film was intended as a vehicle for Spears' transition from pop star to movie star, but it was widely panned for its cliched plot, weak performances, and lack of depth. Despite its commercial success, Crossroads failed to impress critics and is often cited as one of the worst films of the early 2000s. The film won a Razzie for Worst Actress for Spears at the 2003 ceremony, with the film also receiving nominations for Worst Picture and Worst Director. Crossroads has since become a cult favorite among Spears fans, but it remains a low point in her career. The film's failure underscored the challenges of translating pop star success into a successful acting career. Directed by Martin Brest and starring Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, Geely is often cited as one of the worst films ever made. The film follows a low-level mobster, played by Affleck, who is assigned to kidnap the mentally challenged brother of a federal prosecutor. Lopez plays a hitwoman sent to oversee the operation. The film's plot was widely criticized for being incoherent and tonally inconsistent, while the performances were panned for their lack of chemistry and depth. Despite its high-profile cast, Geely was a critical and commercial failure, grossing only $7.2 million against a $75.6 million budget. The film swept the 2003 Razzies, winning in categories such as Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Actress. The film's failure was so significant that it reportedly damaged the careers of its lead actors and led to a hiatus for director Martin Brest. Battlefield Earth is a science fiction film based on the novel by L. Ron Hubbard, directed by Roger Christian and starring John Travolta. Set in a dystopian future where Earth is ruled by an alien race called the Cyclos, the film follows a group of humans who rise up to overthrow their oppressors. Despite its ambitious premise, Battlefield Earth was universally panned for its incoherent plot, poor acting, and excessive use of Dutch angles. The film's failure was reflected in its performance at the 2001 Razzies, where it won 7 awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. Battlefield Earth has been frequently cited as one of the worst films ever made, with critics and audiences alike baffled by its bizarre choices in storytelling and production. The film's disastrous reception effectively stalled John Travolta's career for several years.